Welcome everybody to this subject overview Scrutiny Committee 1. Could I ask everybody to turn their cameras off, please? We're having a lot of interference with the computers this afternoon, so cameras on mute, please, if you will. So I'll start the meeting. Okay, so due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, this meeting will be held virtually with committee members and officers assessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please, can everyone ensure their mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode? Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Tuesday, the 6th of July. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I'd ask, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times keep your cameras and microphones switched off to help minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Please don't use your microphone unless I invite you to do so. So officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will monitor the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary we'll mute them. If any member wishes to raise a point or speak, they should click on the raise hand button at the top of the Teams window, and I'll come to you in turn. Please don't use the instant messenger chat to enter any questions or comments. I'll now ask the Scrutiny Officer to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. The members of Subject Overview and Scrutiny Committee 1 in attendance at the present time are Councillor Tom Beadle, Councillor John Paul Blundell, Councillor Pam Davis, Councillor Sorrel Dundee, Councillor Jane Gebby, Councillor Tom Gifford, Councillor Cheryl Green, Councillor Martin Jones, yourself, Chair, Councillor Kay Rowlands, Councillor Ros Sturman, and registered representatives Reverend Canon Edward Evans and Lindsay Morris. Chair, you're on mute.
Apologies. Councillor Gifford.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I'm going to need to leave about 3:45 today because I have another meeting.
Oh, thank you very much. Are there any other apologies, please, Tracy?
Yes, Chair. I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor Gareth Howells, and Councillor Mary Hughes. Okay,
thank you. Councillor John Paul Blundell, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to report the apologies of Councillor Bridie Sedgebeer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And item 2 is declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declaring a matter on the agenda, please click the raise hand button and I'll come to you in turn. Councillor Beadle, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a personal interest as being the elected chair of the Bridgend Governors Association.
Thank you, Councillor Beadle. Are there any other further declarations of interest? No. Okay, I'll move on to item 3, please, which is the approval of the minutes held on the 15th of March 2021. Councillor John Paul Blundell, did you want to come back in?
I missed the start of the pre-meeting where I'm assuming we discussed declarations of interest. But just for the record, I am a community governor, which is not appointed, and so should be declared as personal interest. But I will also move the minutes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's approval of the minutes on the 15th of March 2021. And can I have a seconder, please?
Second.
Thank you.
Ros.
Great, thanks, Ros. Item 4, so the report of the Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act 2018. I'll ask the officer to present the report.
Thanks, Chair. For the purpose of recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm Corporate Director, Education and Family Support. I'm really pleased to report, Chair, today I've been joined by expert officers from Learner Support. They will talk us through the report and obviously be available then for any questions following it. And also at the start of the report, I'd just like to offer my thanks to all the school-based colleagues who are with us today for giving up their time for this important meeting, obviously at a very challenging part of the school year, so thank you all. So, Chair, with your permission, I'm going to hand over now to Michelle Hatcher, who is Group Manager for Learner Support.
Oh, yes, please. Michelle, continue, please.
Thank you, Chair. Prananda, good afternoon, everybody.
I'm pleased to present the report this afternoon. You've had sight of the report, so I will just go through the kind of the overview of that. In section 1, it outlines the purpose of the report, and that's to inform Cabinet of the developments of the ALN Act of 2018 in Wales, and also the work undertaken across the region to prepare for the implementation of the Act and how as a local authority we are preparing for it. Section 2 refers to the link to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and to section 3, 3.1, just outlining that the Act came into force on the 24th of January 2018, and the regulations that have been set out as a result of that. The fact that the new age range is 0 to 25, and this is replacing existing legislation. 3.2 refers to the ALN Code, which was approved by the Senedd on the 23rd of March 2021. And along with the ALN Act of 2018, the code and regulations will create the statutory ALN system in Wales. 3.3 refers to the preparation of person-centred planning, and that the fact that replaces the learners' places the learner's views and wishes at the heart of the ALN reform. 3.4 refers to the fact that from September 2021, the ALN system will come into force over a 3-year phased implementation period. 3.5 refers to the 3 new statutory coordinating roles, namely the ALNCO, Additional Learning Needs Coordinator, the DECLO, the Designated Education Clinical Lead Officer, and the Early Years Learning Needs Officer. And these came into force on the 4th of January 2021. And I can confirm that all these posts are in place. 3.6 refers to the requirement for a regional additional learning needs and regional transformation plan, and the fact that there is partnership with all agencies, including local authorities, Central South Consortium, schools, further education, colleges and local health boards to support that transformation plan. Section 4 refers to the current situation, and the regional plan, transformation plan for 2020-2021, which you'll find at Appendix A, outlines the developments that have taken place during the past year that was set out with that regional plan. Under 4.2, in Appendix B, you will find Bridgend County Borough Council's regional local transformation plan, and it outlines in bullet points the areas that have been under development. And during the course of the meeting, we will be able to answer questions regarding any of those developments. Under section 4.3, it refers to the plan, the regional plan, the priorities for the year of 2021-2022, which is currently awaiting final approval from Welsh Government. But these outline the main headings moving forward for development, and Bridgend local authority is working towards their plan, which will be submitted in the next couple of weeks, and then awaiting final approval of the regional plan. Point 5 refers to the effect upon policy framework and procedure rules. 6 refers to the Equality Act implications. 7 refers to the Wellbeing of Future Generation Act implications, which then brings us to section 8 of the report. And under 8.1, it refers to the fact that we've had grant over the last 5 financial years to prepare for the implementation. The implementation, as I referred to, is in September 2021, this coming September, but there have been a preparation period utilising that grant to prepare. 8.2, as I referred to previously, has been that preparation for person-centred planning, and a grant was received for that. And under 8.3, it's just a recognition that there's a proposal for additional posts required in order to meet the plan and also the implementation of the reform, and that's been outlined under section 8.3. And as a result of that, budget pressure bids will be submitted as part of MTFS, as currently there is no current resource to meet those needs. Point 9 outlines the recommendations to committee, and that is to note the content of this report in relation to the ALN Act, consider and agree any recommendations the committee may wish to make consistent with its challenge and support role in light of this report, and to consider the progress to date and to be aware of the continued expectations on local authorities and other strategic partners to deliver against the wide-ranging transformation programme. Thank you, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That's great. Well, the way we're going to do it is we're going to refer to the main report as you've just set out now, mainly our progress at the moment, where we are at the moment, and then we'll move on to Annex A and Annex B. So the first question was a general question from Councillor Cheryl Green, if she's ready, on the report.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Yeah, I think my question here basically is for probably the ALN coordinators. As a layperson, I've read this report, but I would like to hear what the professionals and the practitioners feel could be potential drawbacks, problems, benefits as well. And in addition to that, probably a question for the director, has funding been allocated adequately? And will it be allocated adequately? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Do you want to start answering that, Michelle, or shall I ask coordinators to come in?
I think it would be good. We've got 2 additional learning need coordinators present. Chair, we've got Ria. I don't know whether Ria from Blaengarrow would like to start to answer.
Yeah, please come in, Ria.
Okay. With regards to the new Act, obviously it's a big period of change, isn't it? And we have been preparing, I think, as a local authority quite well for that. On a school level, it does prove challenging in that we're likely to have far more questions raised from parents and disagreements regarding the outcomes of our decision as to whether those children now meet the criteria for ALN according to the new definition. But there is a plan in place to address that. You know, we are having dispute resolution training and the SLT are on board, and we are, you know, a rolling programme of training on school levels. And obviously it's really important to make sure that the parents have all that information that is available to them, isn't it? And in a really easy, friendly way. So we have had the link to the website now, and schools are currently in the process of updating their own websites to make sure that we're compliant, ready for September. But the biggest concern really is that we are going to be saying on behalf of the governing body, no, your child doesn't have ALN, and we will of course be able to justify that decision because there's a very strict process in place. But I think moving forward there is likely to be quite a lot of concern raised by parents as to whether their children's needs are being met. And for us, a lot of that responsibility has been put back on class teachers, which is absolutely fine, and it's within their role and their capacity as teachers. But it is requiring a real shift in mindset of whose responsibility these children are. So we've gone through our register this morning, and we've really looked at who our IDP children are for September and who are the children that we still need to be monitoring, because those needs have not gone away. Whereas we might have identified them as ALM previously, they still have needs that need to be met on a school level. So our priority, I think, moving forward as a local authority, not just as a school, is going to be making sure that those children don't slip through the gap, and we've got them, you know, on our radar, and we know that their teaching and learning is good quality and they are being differentiated for, but obviously without that label of having additional learning needs. They've definitely been huge positives. So the collaboration, I think, is the biggest positive. So as clusters, just cluster schools, A-Learners working together has been massively positive, but also obviously now on a local authority level as well, with the forums and the input that's going into those, that is far more positive as well.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question, Cheryl, Councillor Green? Or Michelle, do you want somebody else to expand?
Okay, I don't know whether I think we also have Kate Sparks from my stag that may be able to give you know, any additional or different perspective.
Please come in, Kate.
Hello. I think just to reiterate what Ria has said, it's an absolute positive. I think young people now being protected in terms of the age of 25, which is a real highlight of the ALN bill, is that young people will be able to take the classification of ALN into the world of work. From a secondary school perspective, I think, again, reiterating what Ria has commented about accountability and making sure that the right people understand what their role is and the absolute paramount of good teaching and learning, and if pedagogy has to be at the heart of ALN, and as long as that is in the right place, and I think that's been made very clear from the outset from the ALN leads in terms of making sure that the right outcomes can be achieved by the appropriate level of teaching and learning, which is something we've prioritised here at my steg. I think that refining referral routes, refining routes of communication are areas that the cluster have worked very hard on and the authority have supported with to ensure that all schools know how to get the support they need from the local authority as well. So I recognise that that's been something that the inclusion team have recognised is a priority. Again, to reiterate what Ria was saying about universal provision, one area of concern is the fact that an ALN register could go from over 200 in a secondary school down to 30. But the students who may have been classified as ALN on August the 31st suddenly don't meet that criteria and that definition, which is an area of concern in the sense that, well, do the right people know the right information on how to support that learner? So it is, as Ria said, a mindset shift that I think collaboratively as a cluster and as Bridgend as a local authority, we've all been guided very clearly on in ensuring that our teaching staff are aware of what the expectations are and how that can be conveyed to teachers so they know who is sat in front of them. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Green, do you want anything? Do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you very much. Can I just say, Chair, I'm very, very pleased to hear about the positives and obviously the raised age. I do have concerns now that obviously the criteria has been raised for ALN now, and I would like to see this committee monitor in the future the effects of this raising of criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Michelle, did you want to come back in on any of that, or are you content that that's everything needs to be said? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. Just to say that obviously as a local authority, we're working very closely in partnership with schools and, you know, monitoring those children and young people. And we've got, you know, a close eye with the schools on those children. It's really important.
Thank you very much. That's great. So it's a question for myself now, actually. You just mentioned, or Ria just mentioned, that the positives with the collaborative working. Can you tell us more about the collaborative working outside of the consortium? Have we got neighbouring authorities which are perhaps more suited to Bridgend, which we are learning from?
So, Chair, we work very strongly as a consortium, and we've worked collaboratively before actually the transformation plan came into force. We worked as a consortium on for example, the person-centred planning approach. So we are continuously looking at good practice from one another. We all sit on the transformation board, so that we all have regular contact with one another, as do officers. So I think it's suffice to say that we work very collaboratively as a region, and also then perhaps particularly more recently with Merthyr and Rhondda Cynon Taf, with particularly the health board footprint. So yeah, I would say that is a strength, and it was pre kind of the transformation plan and transformation board being put in place. Okay. With regards to the area of inclusion.
Okay, perhaps it's a question for the consortium then, whether or not they actually work in hand with neighbouring consortiums. I'll leave that one for when they come in. Okay. So the next point we've got, referring to 4.1.2 2 of the report now, where it says that you're ensuring local authorities does develop a consistent approach to complement the national wider education reforms. And my concern is that there's going to be problems trying to get a consistent approach with ALN when you're trying to put in place bespoke curriculum. Are you finding this a problem?
I think we're working together on kind of that area, but I wonder if the schools would like to come in at that point, as they're involved in both the curriculum reform development and the ALN reform. Would it be good to? I know we've got.
Yes, please. I got Helen Jones's hand up. Thank you for coming in.
I think that's music to my ears, actually. I think what we've planned for our inset day, for example, is trying to marry together the ALN reform, which, if you look at that, the implication for teachers is all about the pupil-centred planning. So as far as I'm concerned, the new curriculum reform that focuses on is purpose planning, which is the 4 purposes, and focusing on the type of child we're trying to produce rather than delivering content, goes hand in hand with ALN reform. And I think that's very much the approach that we've taken at my stake, to focus on well-being with all of the connotations of that word, with ALN reform and curriculum reform right at the heart of that. You take all of those reforms away, because that could intimidate and overwhelm staff, and you're basically looking at what is the best quality teaching and learning for the children in your classroom. That's it in a nutshell. So we're trying to simplify that. And take away the sort of myth and horror around the words reform, because that can be intimidating, and that's been our priority. So I think, or hope, that we've done that quite seamlessly, allowing our staff to concentrate on the nature of the class they've got in front of them, which will tick the box and deliver the best practice for the pupils with regard to ALN reform and curriculum reform. So we hope that we're doing that correctly.
That's reassuring. C. Jones, sorry, I don't know your first name.
It's Chris. I'm the head
Chris,
of
I do apologise.
No, just like to echo what Helen has said. It's for us as a school, we are focusing on good quality teaching and learning, because for us, as has been mentioned earlier, our ALN register is changing. And fundamentally, it's going to be about universal coverage in the classroom. So what we are focusing on in Llangynnoed is really high quality, effective teaching and learning that caters for all needs, whether that's more able and talented or your young people with additional learning needs. And if we can get that right, it dovetails into our curriculum reform agenda as well, where we're designing and bespoke curriculums for each class. So I think for us as a school, like Helen, it's looking at teaching first, and good quality differentiation. Resources should enable all our learners to make appropriate and expected progress.
That's very, very reassuring. Thank you very much. I've got no other teachers. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Could I bring in our principal educational psychologist, Kath Morgan, please, with regards to the ALN registers? Thank you.
Of course.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
It was just something in terms of a thread of what I've picked up from one of the earlier questions and some of the feedback from some of our school staff around the concern about the criteria changing and moving from an SEN system to an ALN system. And it's some of the work that we've been involved in regionally. So that obviously comes back to your question as well, Chair, around our regional sort of working partners. And I was heavily involved in looking at the definition of ALN and how we define what is an additional learning need to support our schools and our parents in terms of moving forward with the new reform. And what was really interesting, and we looked at the data in lots of detail. We looked at all Wales data, we looked at regional data, we looked at things like national tests, we looked at the normal distribution and some of the work that my team at the Educational Psychology Service would undertake in terms of their assessments. And the existing data across Wales was that schools were identifying 23% of their population on average as having a special educational need. But when we actually looked at the levels of need across normal distributions and across sort of data sets coming in from things like national tests, we need to be shifting that to around 9 to 10%, sort of below 10% of our population have an additional learning need that requires something additional to what is ordinarily available. So we're coming back to that sort of universal, that good, where it links back into the curriculum, that good teaching and learning, and it's how we, within all of the really great work that's taking place in our schools, we're supporting learners. So loads and loads of really good quality interventions are already in place, and we're not talking about doing anything different. It's how we, so we're not talking about a child on the 31st of August had a need and on the 1st of September they don't. We're talking about the fact that that good quality intervention and provision is still there, but in a way we are looking at how we can support our learners in maybe a different identification system, or I don't want to use the word label, but when we're talking about these children who might be a concern, who might need a boost, who might access those interventions, as different to a much smaller group of children that require something very different, an additional learning provision that is not available to the rest of their peers. So that we're sort of targeting interventions for the children whose additional learning needs are particularly significant. So it's been such a journey, but such an interesting piece of work in terms of working with the schools and working with the region, because it's made everyone look at the good quality interventions that they have. And it's those sort of conversations to say that those interventions and that support is still there, but actually for a much smaller group of children, which is probably right across the board in terms of that normal distribution, how can we put greater input and a learning provision around the children with the most need? I just wasn't sure if that might help the kind of some of the threads we were talking about.
Yeah,
Thank
we do.
you.
As we go down slightly in more detail of that line of questioning a little later, if that's okay. Can I bring in Kate Sparks, please?
Hiya, I just want to support really what Kath was alluding to, just to give a bit of meat on the bone really from a school perspective. With regards to ALN, the students who meet the classification of ALN and having that additional provision, what schools are doing and what we've been recommended to do is we have a universal provision list here at MySteg. Therefore, young people who do require teaching staff to be aware of who they are and perhaps may have a diagnosis of something, but don't require anything other than really good teaching and learning, and the pupils to be aware of them. So our approach has been that, as Kath alluded to, having different methods of monitoring the learners, that has been recommended firmly by the authority and is something that we've taken on. So we will have our universal provision list of your learners who teachers are aware of, their needs have been flagged up in terms of how the teacher can best get they are best from them, and that will be then separate from our ALN register, which is something that rightly so is significantly smaller because the learning provision that's needed there is very bespoke. So it's just a change in approach really, and making sure that all learners are identified and highlighted to the right people. So I just wanted to give a bit of an example there really to reinforce and support what Kath was saying.
Sounds all very positive at the moment. That's great. Thank you very much, Kate. The final question, slightly going off into a different subject now of this report, is about the projected increase in children living in Bridgend, whether or not we have other than COVID related, because I know there's an increase in children who do need extra learning needs. Are we inheriting children from other authorities, for example? Are there other things that are happening which is putting pressure on the council?
Could I bring Kath Morgan back in on that point, please, Chair? Thank you.
To a certain extent, we are a victim of our own success. Particularly for the strength of our special schools. There is significant pressure on both schools in terms of pressure for places, we regularly, I would say, I get weekly requests for places in our special schools, and it's from out of authority, but also very frequently, a couple of times a month, families moving into the area requesting provision in one of the specialist, provisions or special schools. So I definitely think that there is a significant pressure. We are unable to accommodate broadly any pupils living out of authority who are just requesting a special school placement, and that's not different to other local authorities who, again, due to capacity, are unable to offer additional places to out of authority. But we are getting families moving in, and of course that's their right to move in, but I do think that we are getting families who are moving in because of the strength of our schools. So there is a significant pressure. I don't know if this is related, but I know in our Access to Education panel, we've had conversations around the fact that there are, Bridgend is very supportive and has in recent times developed lots of provision for children who are care experienced, and the facilities for children who come to supported housing in Bridgend, not necessarily, and then they are living here, and then that is putting significant pressure again on our special schools. So they're located, they're living in Bridgend because the homes have been established and set up, but then the education is sort of following it, if that makes sense. So we've noticed that in Access to Education as a significant challenge.
Yes, thank you. It's all sorts of financial questions I won't raise with yourselves, because unless you've got that information, but I'll pass it on to Jill when we have the next opportunity for Jill Lewis. Or Michelle, have you got an outline of how much that's costing us?
We would know that, but I would have to get that.
I will, yeah, I'll bring that up in a different committee, no problem.
We certainly keep an eye on that, Chair, very closely,
yeah.
but we'd have to glean that information if that's okay.
Of course, no problem. Can I, Councillor Tom Beadle, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a point that was raised by Kath, where she identified that 23% of our children will have a need. I'm wondering what is the area of need, because within the Act we are looking at those that got excuse me, visual impairment, those that have got hearing impairment, ADHD, autism. So you've got quite a broad spectrum of need, and just to put a figure of 23% in it, I think this committee would like to know exactly what the proportions are of that 23%.
So, Chair, if I could bring Kath back in, and then it might be helpful to hear about some of the other leads that lead the other areas of the service, for example, visual and hearing impairment, after Kath.
So in terms of the figure of 23%, that's come from regional data and drawn from national data, and that would come from the PLASC, where schools record and identify which area of special educational need it was previously, before we've coming into the new reform. So that would be a range of global developmental delay, severe learning difficulties, emotional, behavioural and social difficulties. So it would be a range of additional needs, making up that 23%. And how that's broken down was not shared in terms of the regional data in the group that I was part of. Rather, that was the PLASC data, so any child recording an additional need. What's really interesting, and this is a massive shift for us as professionals, but also a huge challenge for families, is under the new reform, we are looking at the learning, the impact on learning, the learning need. So things like a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or visual impairment, and I'm sure you know, I think Michelle might bring in some of our other officers, is that those sort of, that diagnosis in itself would not be classed as an additional learning need. We have to look at, and this is a massive shift for us, on the barriers to learning. So a child with autism wouldn't necessarily have an additional learning need. And I think that's a massive ask for families who, you know, I've picked ASD and autism as one example, because that's a huge shift, because that has a massive impact on that young person and that family. And to be told that might not necessarily qualify for as an additional learning need. So it's not to say that under the Equality Act that there are not challenges or there are not disabilities. So if we were talking about visual impairment or hearing impaired, but what is the barrier to learning? So we have children across our local authority with all of the challenges and difficulties that you've outlined, for example, who would not have a barrier to learning because they may have a diagnosis, because potentially any equipment or materials or a medication might be supporting them to enable them to learn with their peers. That would not be an ALN. They might have a healthcare plan, they might have under the Equality Act equipment, but that wouldn't necessarily be an ALN. So that's a big challenge that we've identified, and that we are obviously working, and obviously all of our schools are working with families around that. It's a very different, you know, to the previous code of practice to this new code. There's a massive shift, and it's around what is the barrier to learning. So at every point we say, what is the barrier to learning? So it's positive because it's about need. It's about what is the learning need. It's not about the label. But again, you know, I can appreciate that's a massive ask.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come in, Samantha?
Hello there. Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm Sam, and I'm the sensory lead for our young people with a hearing impairment and a visual impairment in Bridgend. So thank you for the question. Just to reassure you really that our numbers remain quite stable throughout. And with regards to the reasonable adjustments that we have in place, that won't change for our young people who are identified with a hearing impairment or a visual impairment. So we're all about removing the barriers to learning. And as you may already be aware, that often we're involved at a very early stage, that early intervention, as soon as the diagnosis is made. So we are here to support and promote the access to learning. So with the implementation of the new ALN from September 2021, that's not going to affect what we provide for our young people with a hearing impairment and a visual impairment. So they will still have access to our services. And where we're removing the barriers to learning, that could be, for example, access to the specialist teachers, that could be access to specialist equipment, training up how to use those and develop those skills. So they will remain in place for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I've got no more hands up, so I'll move on to the next stage of the report, which was questions for the consortium, or it might not be directly for the consortium. But first of all, we have Lindsay Morris, if you're ready to come in, Lindsay.
Hi, yeah, thanks. The point 4.2 states that we need to increase the ALN provision to Welsh medium schools. This is suggesting that provision has been lacking in Welsh medium schools. I'd just like to know what sort of stage we're at with making sure that Welsh medium pupils are having the same sort of provision as the English medium counterparts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can come in there. Thank you,
Michelle.
So as part of this work, the part of the plan that talks about Welsh medium, there's kind of been an increase in looking at Welsh medium resources and training as a consortium in respect of the ALN Act. And we've got a member of staff that's heavily involved in that and has started to deliver training on a consortium level. We're very fortunate within the Learner Support Service, and particularly the ALN teams, of having really good qualified Welsh-speaking members of staff. And then with respect to Welsh medium provision more widely with ALN, we've conducted an ALN strategic planning review, and we're currently in the process of reviewing that, and we've got a board in place and subcommittees that feed into that board looking at Welsh media and education. Also, that's part of the Welsh in Education strategic plan, which I also have responsibility for. So it's really good that these things are kind of joining up together. So, for example, it was identified previously that there needed to be equity with provision with children who had a diagnosis of autism, that if they were also Welsh speaking, that they would be able to continue their education through the medium of Welsh. And as you would be aware, we then opened a learning resource centre for autism for Welsh speakers at Calon y Cymoedd, and then subsequently the secondary learning resource centre at Ysgol Gymraeg Llangynnoed. We are currently looking at moderate learning difficulty provision and whether we need to open learning resource centres in that area. So I would just want to reassure that we've got a close eye on that, and data is very much informing kind of the developments in those areas. But I just want to reassure that we're really committed to ensuring that there is really good quality provision, quality support for those children and young people that speak Welsh within the county borough.
Are you somewhat reassured, Lindsay?
Sort of, but it does seem to sound as if a lot of it is being reviewed or planned for, that there's not actually anything in place at the minute for them, which, I mean, I think I'm still right in saying that there's still only one test for dyslexic Welsh-speaking students, which I know that was the case 14 years ago when my son was diagnosed, which, I mean, it's, you know, it's still not acceptable.
Thank you. Could I bring Rachel Garner in, one of my managers, please?
Yes, please.
Is that okay,
Yeah, no
Chair?
problem.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
So there's two elements there. So my responsibility within this is the cognition and learning team. In terms of the MLD resource bases, as Michelle's already mentioned, we're looking into the opening of new provision in terms of MLD in Welsh speaking schools. The provision already exists. It's just because of the numbers of students there have been in the past, it's more virtual. So rather than it being set in one school, the teacher moves from school to school. So the provision is just there. It's just not the same. And the numbers are now showing that there are enough children to be able to open provision at primary, and then we're hoping then obviously there'll be the numbers or the evidence to show what's required at secondary. So the provision is there, it's just in a different format at the moment. In terms of resources, yes, I think you're correct. There aren't as many Welsh specific resources as we would like in the Welsh sector. My understanding is that work had started pre-COVID, particularly on a reading test, but it was due to be trialled, I think, in Cardiff schools as COVID hit. So as you can understand, that wasn't possible, but that's now going to be readdressed, and there are moves to develop those resources. But yes, I don't disagree with you. I think we are lacking in the Welsh sector, but there are certainly plans to change that and move that forward. And I'd say that's actually quite a big bit that underlines in the new Act that there needs to be that equity of provision. So we now have that contained within the Act to help and support that that development.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Do you have a deadline of when that's supposed to be coming in, the extra provisions for the Welsh speakers?
The MLD for primary September 2022 as a physical base. Like I said, that it already exists in terms of the teacher and the children that are being supported, but the physical base, we're hoping the plan will be September 22.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just say that when you said that the numbers didn't seem to support that there was a need for as much provision there, or the provision was done virtually or remotely, is that not the case probably because parents that have got children with additional needs are in Welsh medium schools, because the support is not available there, and then they're sort of forced to move them to English medium schools?
No, it's what I mean is in sort of terms of the equity of the provision. So the provision to date has had to be different. So in an English medium school, for example, there are enough children to have a whole class in a year group, whereas in the Welsh medium schools, there are the 4 primaries. So therefore, from 4 primary schools feeding in, there will be less children. So therefore, it has to look a little different. But now we feel that there are enough to manage a class within Welsh provision, so they've actually got a physical class. If you think you're feeding in from 4 Welsh primaries, I'm relatively new to Bridgend, so I couldn't tell you how many primaries off the top of my head, but 50 English speaking primaries, so the numbers are always going to be slightly lower in the Welsh sector.
And Chair, if I may come in, thank you, Rachel. We've always worked in collaboration with head teachers, so it was actually the model at one point that was agreed that they would rather have than just one learning resource centre based in one school, to have that model across the local authority. But things have now moved on, and that's why we're looking at kind of the new model, and also then develop through to secondary, because it's really important that you have that continuation of provision.
I agree. Okay, we're going to slightly change subject now. I'm moving on to Councillor Jane Gebby. Are you ready, Councillor Gebby?
I am indeed. Thank you very much, Chair. I am sorry, though. I keep being kicked out. So if you lose me, that's why.
No problem.
I just have a question, really, on Central South Consortium. I'm a member of staff for Neathport Talbot. I'm very aware that consortiums are not, I want to say, not agreeable to every council and not very stable, I would suggest. So what is ours like? Is it stable? What is the likelihood of us putting together a regional plan that we can't actually implement them because we haven't got all those partners? So I think that's my question, please. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gebby. Are you able to answer that, Michelle?
Yeah, I think Lindsay's got his hand up. Shall I let Lindsay come in first?
Certainly, thanks.
Thank
you. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. As far as Councillor Gebby's question is concerned, obviously it's a really important one, the relationship we have with the consortium. Now, I used to work for Swansea, so I've got some understanding of the way the consortium worked in South West Wales as well. It is a different model. In South West Wales, it was more an alliance of the local authorities that were there. Within Central South, it's a different model. It's a business that we subscribe to through an intelligent client function. So in effect, we pay into a service, and that service has a set of business objectives within a plan that they need to deliver on. So it is a slightly different one. I think Councillor Gebby's challenge is a good one, though, because ultimately, if we are spending money from this council, we expect a good service. And as far as the service we get from Central South is concerned, I think it's fair to say the feedback we have from schools, and certainly from the officers, is we are confident it is providing value for money. Not least in additional learning needs, but in the wide range of teaching and learning and leadership support that we get from them. I think what would be helpful, of course, is that through you, Chair, if you could invite some comments in through ultimately the recipients of this, our head teachers, to see their thoughts. But as far as the local authority is concerned, I would say the service is a very good one.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'll bring in Councillor Charles Smith, but after that, if any teachers would like to comment on the consortium, I'd be grateful.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very quick because it is important to get the teachers' point of view. I just want to comment on the political direction behind Central South. Jane mentioned the stability and also the possibility of some partners not being fully involved. Well, I've just finished a stint as chair of Central South. The current leader of Vigend was a past chair. Chris Elmore was the original chair, I think I'm right in saying, and the cabinet member from Cardiff was the chair immediately before me, and the cabinet member for education in RCT is the current chair now. So there's a rotation of chairs. There's a rotation of all the lead positions. I think I'm right in saying that Lindsay is the lead director for the foreseeable future. So there is a stable and ongoing political commitment to the Central South. So it's not comparable in any shape or form with what happened in what I still call West Glamorgan, but you know what I mean. I would say that Vigend, Vale of Glamorgan, Cardiff, Merthyr and RCT are committed to the business plan. We got an excellent permanent secretariat there, an excellent director and deputy director. We meet with Welsh Government and we meet on equal terms. We are respected by Welsh Government and we respect Welsh Government and everything that goes on. And when it comes to specialised functions like additional learning needs, I have never found the Central South wanting. The expertise is there. They will draw on the expertise. I know for a fact that we've got tremendous expertise here in Bridgend. I just wish we could have had 2 more festivals of learning after the one we had, but circumstances put paid to one and COVID put paid to the other. But I made it my business to attend a couple of ALN workshops during the Festival of Learning, and I came away full of admiration for the professional staff we've got. So on that note, I'll shut up and hand over to our professional staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. So do I have any teachers that'd like to come in and comment on the consortium? Again, sorry, Quinn.
Yes, Ria,
I
thank you.
apologise. I will get used to everyone's names. Obviously, I'm new.
I haven't had huge experience of ALN through the consortia, and to be fair, I have been an Elenco since 2012. But the workforce development programme that they're currently developing has been hugely beneficial. So I've just completed the middle leadership programme, and they're currently planning forward now for a hub playlist to do with ALN from September, and we've been invited to participate in that as well. So, I mean, the transformational lead is Liz Jones, and she's been very beneficial really on a consortia level, and anything that obviously I go to Michelle quite frequently, and then obviously I'll go to Liz Jones as well quite frequently for any support and advice. So from our perspective as a school, it's been very positive, the relationship with the consortia.
Great, okay, that's good to hear. I've got no other teachers with our hands up. Councillor Gebb, we have got our next meeting, I believe, is on a consortia. So we will be going further into this. Is there anything you want to comment at this meeting?
No, thank you very much, Chair. I am quite reassured by
Great.
the Cabinet members and the Director's comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Michelle, please.
It was just to say, Chair, that we do have John Welsh from the Central South Consortium here, just for us to be aware if you wanted any comment from the consortium.
Unless he wants to put his hand up.
That's fine. Just.
Oh, there we go. Hello.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, just to say, to share all my colleagues' words that they've said so far, we're trying to work in partnership to align the support, marrying up the ALM work, the new curriculum side of things, and we're really, the whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing, big challenges for schools and local authorities and consortia to find our way through, and we're working really closely. The consortia have been part of the development of the regional guidance. And this will sit alongside the consortia's work on equity and excellence, enabling equity and excellence, which is the strategy looking at teaching learning for all pupils. All teachers are teachers of ALN. We need to get that right in the classroom first and foremost. So, yeah, just to echo all of my my colleagues' comments so far.
Great, thank you very much. I'll move on to Canon Edward Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. I presume this is where you want me to ask about the strategic plan? Or
Yes.
was it something else?
No, it wasn't the
No.
strategic.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Just a very simple question, Chair. Does Bridgend actually, at this moment in time, have a very specific strategic plan for the implementation, the full implementation of the bill? You've heard Michelle talking about development and how they're reviewing. Is there actually a specific plan in place at this moment in time? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, if I could come in, Chair, please.
Michelle, yes, thank you.
So each year we there is a regional plan, and there is Bridgend then produce its local plan, and there is a local Bridgend board, and each month the ALN transformation leads attends that board, and we give an update on the progress of our plan. So for the coming year, the plans are in draft, awaiting Welsh Government approval. But yes, certainly we've consulted on the coming plan amongst team members, and that there will be a concrete plan in place going forward for September. But the work has continued. The work, even though just when one plan ceases and we're awaiting another plan to be put in place, the work continues. It's ongoing work, seamless work. So, for example, last week we had another additional learning need coordinators forum. So that continues on a termly basis. So basically the work is weekly work. We're constantly looking at how we take the different areas on to the next step in the most timely way that we can put those steps in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Lindsay Morris now. Lindsay Morris, are you ready?
Yep. Yeah, sorry, I'm difficulty.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. So looking on page 27 there, the on priority one, it uses the phrase that a group of students in the predetermined cohort would be used. That phrase is used a couple of times throughout the appendix. I'm just wondering who is ensuring that pupils outside of the predetermined cohort are still being given the support that they need?
Thank you, Chair. Is that with reference to the individual development plans?
It was the one on page 27, I think, where that was, yeah. Yes, it was the IDPs, yes.
Okay, thank you. Please may I bring Kath Morgan in on that point, as she's been developing that area. Thank you, Chair.
In terms of this year, leading up to the implementation of the reform, all local authorities were able to look at pilots to support the implementation of the code. And across the region, there were different priorities and different groups of children that were identified as part of those pilots. At the start of the year, alongside some of our colleagues in the Vale and in RCT, we identified, in terms of the highest level of need, the pupils in our special school, to look at developing some of those pilot IDPs. So, for example, in Ysgol Bryn Castell, in YBC, we identified that a priority group for us would be some of our young people known to the Youth Justice Service, and how we managed supporting and developing their individual development plans moving forward. So we identified a priority group there. And in Heronsbridge Special School, we looked at our youngest pupils, our reception aged pupils who would come into the special school, whose families were happy to be the pilot around IDPs, as they did not have statements of special educational need at that point. As the year has played out because of the impact of COVID and a change in direction from Kirsty Williams sort of earlier in March, they shifted some of the timescales around the implementation of the Act and the timelines. And so from September 2021, special schools have been excluded from the new statutory code of having to have IDPs. So the work was still important, and it still is important moving forward. But the shift from Kirsty Williams at the time was to looking at the pupils having a school-based IDP rather than a local authority maintained IDP. And there were certain year groups that were set out. And it, as a result of that, so we were looking at nursery, year 1, off the top of my head, year 3, 5, 7, and year 11. So we, as part of our rollout with our school partners and through our ALNCO forums, have identified pupils who were at key stages of transition. So our year 2 learners moving into year 3, our year 6 learners transitioning into secondary as being a priority group for school-based IDP. So our schools and our ALNCOs and our clusters and through our ALNCO forums have been piloting in every school the development and the writing of IDPs with our officers. So with our cognition and learning team and with our educational psychology service team, really driving through and supporting the work around the development of IDPs. So when we're talking about identifying certain groups, that actually cuts across the whole of our education system. So the priority this term has been looking at the work around the early years IDPs, which is a significant challenge and a significant shift. So just as an example, we're moving from a 3 to 19 system to a 0 to 25. So our early years educational psychologists have got a broadened remit, and with Rachel, who's new in post as the early years lead officer, really focusing on looking at IDPs for our youngest learners, because for that group, they're all local authority IDPs, so the responsibility is on the local authority. So we've stepped up that work this term, and they've been piloted alongside our health colleagues. So when it says a predetermined group, there are groups, but those groups actually cut across school maintained IDPs, local authority IDPs, special school, mainstream. We've got pilots in our observation classes, looking at the pupils in our observation classes around, again, school-based IDPs, but often a lot more input from our sort of specialist services to support that. Our youngest early years pupils, and we'd ask schools to pilot year 11s. So again, that's sort of a new field, because we were talking about learners who were at school leaving age or potential school leaving age. And I know Sam, who spoke earlier in terms of her sort of sensory team, linking with the college. So we've broadened the remit. It talks about predetermined groups, but there's lots of them. So we're talking about high need, smaller numbers. When we talk about sensory, we're talking about early years, we're talking specialist provision, special schools, mainstreams, just to ensure that we are ready and problem solving and working with all of our schools and officers to kind of ensure, because it's, you know, as you can appreciate, and as you can, you know, from some of the conversations, it's a massive ask and it's a massive change, and it just ensuring with the staffing that we have, our best spread to make progress around IDPs. There's still a long way to go, but we started.
Thank you. Did you want to come in, Michelle? Oh, so you're on mute.
Apologies, just to say that that the early years coordinator or Rachel Garner could speak, and Sam Thomas McGill with further education, if you wanted them both to come in.
Hi, Rachel.
Hiya. So I guess just to add to what Kath was saying in terms of the early years, again, because the IDPs aren't statutory until September 1st, it's which children do you pick? So the children that we selected to start with are those that we know are going into our specialist provision. So we know very well that they will be requiring an IDP from September when the new Act comes in. But equally, because the idea was to pilot it, and it is all about collaborative working with our health colleagues, we did select children where we knew there was health involvement, because again, the pilots were about everybody working together and everybody learning from the process in terms of how it was going to work. So the children that we have selected for that were the ones that we knew were going to have an IDP, and those with a lot of involvement from other agencies, and also where we thought parents would be willing and able to come along with us on the pilot to be able to be part of that process, and essentially guinea pigs to try it out before September 1st as well. So it's a little different in the early years settings because they don't necessarily have the technology that some of the schools might have to involve people and the space. So actually, it wasn't just about selecting children and looking at their needs and IDPs. It was about how the whole personal centred approach would work in settings with many different people, and a lot more emphasis for some of the early years now with health involvement, the health visitors in particular and their involvement in that process, and the personal centred planning way of doing things. In education, we've been talking about it and practicing it maybe for a couple of years now, whereas I think that's only just starting to seep into our health colleagues. So again, it's about bringing everybody along on that process, really.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
And Chair, could I ask Sam if she could talk about the work with further education, please, post 16?
Hi, thank you. Just to say that our links with Further Education College, they've always been in place for our young people who have a sensory impairment. And it's about maintaining that the young person is at the centre of everything we do. So thinking about those transition links as we move forward, ensuring that the young person has their voice as they leave one education setting and moving into another, but also to look at what they may benefit from as they grow and they move through education, what they want to have in terms of equipment, how they would like to be supported, what information they would like us to share about their hearing impairment or their visual impairment. So it's working closely with the college really, but in a more formal way, linking it to the IDPs and supporting our college professionals to ensure that they have a fuller understanding of the needs and the voice of our young people that we support as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's great, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor, sorry, Michelle, did you want to come back in?
No, just thank you both. That was excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Tom Beadle, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a point that Kath raised about youth justice. Obviously, that there's a number of young people involved with youth justice, but my thoughts then move further afield because we are now talking about 0 to 25. It's where are we in respect to identifying these barriers to learning, and especially for the young people that we've got in young offenders institutes. So that actually raised its head for me, as well as identifying those under 25 that are currently in the youth wing of prisons. So that because it is a state-funded facility and education is available in both them settings, it's very curious to me, especially for the young people that are moving from educational settings such as school and find themselves in Young Offenders Institute. So it's a question of joining up the dots for these young people that got these barriers to learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beadle. Do you want to come in, Michelle?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know whether Kath wanted to come back with anything then, but I know Nicola would like to come in. Nicola's got a hand up.
Thank you. Hi, Nicola.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a very important point that Councillor Beadle makes there. Obviously, some of our young people that are involved with the Youth Justice Service can be some of the most vulnerable young people that we work with across the local authority. One of the initiatives Kath's mentioned is looking at them through the IDP process and ensuring that their educational needs are being met when they are in the community. And you know, we know that we have had an issue in the past with some young people known to the service being on quite reduced timetables, and we've now got a system through using the IDPs that this is reviewed very regularly, and that we make sure that those children are given the numbers of educational hours that they're entitled to. Luckily, we have very low incarceration rates now for children and young people. However, unfortunately, occasionally a young person does commit an offence and does go into a custodial institution. Dependent on the institution and their age, obviously, they will be provided with statutory education within a custodial institution if they are of statutory school age, and that education is subject to monitoring by external kind of monitoring systems such as ESTIN, depending on the institution. But in addition to that, our Youth Justice Service maintains contact with young people throughout their sentence and post release, and there is a plan for each young person which is followed up with their youth offending worker, social worker usually, who monitors their sentence and monitors all of the interventions that they're given throughout their sentence. And that includes education, but also making sure, for example, their health needs are met if they're in a custodial environment, or any mental health needs. All of their needs are met through their sentence planning and their post-release planning.
Great. Okay, that's very reassuring again. Okay. So the final question I have on this part is from Councillor Jane Gebby. Councillor Gebby.
Chair, if I may interject, Councillor Gebby did text me to say that she got kicked out of the meeting, so she might
Right,
not be able
okay.
to get back in yet. No
problem. We'll come back to that if we need to then. Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. I'm moving on now to Annex B of the report of our agenda pack. And I'll start myself on page 41, which mention. Oh, sorry, actually we've covered that already. It's about the neighbouring authorities, but we've actually covered that. So we'll move on to 34, and the members had an interest in the new governor's responsibilities. It mentions it on page 43 and page 47 of Annex B, and Councillor Tom Beadle was going to come in on that one, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was trying to pull my notes up, but very difficult when they change in between screens. I think concerns arise around devised ALN readiness, audits tailored to different key professional examples, ALN corps, head teachers, governing bodies, elected members, to inform actions, interventions at school and local authority on a regional level. As being the chair of the Gen Governors Association, I'm interested to find out the response to this, given the fact that the timetables are out somewhat from September 20, but the implications for governors as regards to being a part of this audit, because as you well know, a governor's term of office is only at 4 years at a time, and therefore I know from further on in the report it actually states about the whole governing body, but when you got link governors working with key professionals, sometimes that link governor is not there for the next term of office. But I am curious as regards to this audit, when it entails, and how they're going to conduct it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Shall I come in?
Yes, please. That'd be great.
So just to say that the ALN Transformation Lead has been looking at governor training, and that's been on offer as a consortium. And then I think this is in relation to the ALN readiness kind of work? Yeah. So could I bring in one of our ALNCOs to start with on that, please? Because I know that they've done an awful lot of work on that, and they may be able to start us off correctly in that way.
Ria, please.
Hiya.
Hello.
I'm not sure what you want from me, Michelle, but I will have a good stab at it. We've just done governing body training last week for our federation schools, and we really looked at the where we're moving forward, what our aims are for the next academic year with regards to the implementation of the ALM reform, and really making it clear regarding the next steps and what actions we're hoping to take place as a cluster. Well, as a school, firstly, it is a collaborative approach, so it is as a cluster. It's come from our implementation guide, which has come from the ALM reform and all the documentation that is available and all the things that need to be in place to be compliant. It is a 3-year year rolling out programme, and the governing body did have some questions, about legally where does it put them if they're having, it's delegated responsibility, isn't it, that goes to the school, in that we are able to make decisions about whether these children are ALN or not, and obviously our governing body are trusting us in our judgment and professional judgment on that, aren't they? I think I understand rightly, Michelle, that there is to be some legal advice for head teachers and governing bodies regarding that process as well. We've been a little bit delayed in that, but that's definitely on the agenda. So on our implementation guide, you will see that as a one of the points on there, that there will be some additional training. And we've also, Liz Jones offered the training on a consortia level, but we did within our cluster signposted that out to all the governors within the cluster, so that they could then, if they hadn't attended the training, they could listen to Liz's video and get an overview, and then obviously come back with questions and answer session then, which obviously was the purpose of the governing body training then last week. So I do think we have worked hard, I think, to keep governors as informed as we possibly can, given the magnitude of the ALM reform and everything that is going on. And I do feel that as we're moving forward, there will be, a bigger need for this to happen on a more regular basis. I mean, COVID has impacted, hasn't it? But as in a starting point moving forward from September, I think as long as governing bodies are aware of the changes in the reform, and that there's a plan in place and schools are working on those plans, and we are following the local authorities' agenda, then I'm not too concerned that the governors aren't being informed as they should be. Thank you.
Okay, Lindsay's popped his hands up. Can I bring in Lindsay, please?
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick one from me. Just first of all, to recognise the sterling efforts that Councillor Beadle does to support the local authority in helping us with governor training, because the Bridgend Governors Association has been a real strength of Bridgend over a few years. The point I wanted to make very quickly, Chair, is every year we're asked by Central South Consortium to identify local authority priorities within the Central South Consortium business plan. Now, if you look, it's on the site, but I can provide the link. Is the local authority, one of the local authority targets for this year is to support the recruitment and development of school governors. That's one of our key priorities. So part of that will be making sure that certain training, ALN reform, curriculum reform, and other key items will be part of that as well. So just to reassure you, Chair, and to reassure Councillor Beadle, this has been identified as being a key priority for us within the regional plan.
Okay, can I just point out, Lindsay, on I think it's page 43. I believe it says that the training's already been done. Yes, you've got school staff time, March. Oh no, perhaps that's not, so governors haven't perhaps had the training yet, have you? I took that as everybody.
If I can just come in, Chair, that is with regards to that rolling training programme for ALNCOs. Governors, that training has been offered at Central South, but as I've said, we're moving forward to another year, and then that needs to kind of be developed even further. Please, Margot, just go back to the point that that Ria raised with regards to legal advice and then kind of supporting schools with that. So the code was came out later than anticipated, so the code didn't come out until towards the end of March. So local authority officers, our legal team, have just had a legal training in the last couple of weeks. So therefore the plan is that there will be a plan of action moving forward next year in order to support schools, just to report back on that. And I don't know whether, thank you, Ria, for what Ria's just come in and said. I don't know whether Kate or any of the other head teachers would like to say anything with regards to support or the audit, the ALM readiness.
Kate Sparks, please.
I think Tom raised a really interesting point about turnover of staff with regard to the governing body, because I think what Tom was asking is a really interesting question from my perspective as well, is if a governor, for example, receives the training and then no longer is in position, I think it's reassuring to hear from key members here today that training will be continuous. So as governors roll on and roll off, that the training will still be available, because obviously somebody may never have had any information with regards to this procedure and then suddenly become accountable for making decisions. So I think it's really heartening to hear that is something that is planned now, that there will be that continuous training provision for possibly new governors. That's all. Thank you
very much. Thank you. And bring in Helen Jones, please.
Yeah, just a quick point that I would be uncomfortable, I think, as a head teacher, not to have had some input from whether it's the consortia, whether it's the LEA, to ensure that I'm doing the right thing and giving the right message across to my governors. I think it is always a dangerous situation where individual head teachers are responsible for training governors, only because that doesn't then achieve the consistency that the local authority is aiming for. So I think I welcome that, and as soon as that training programme is put together, particularly with regard to the legal advice, I think that we're all desperately crying out for that.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Tom Beadle, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to come back in and advocate strongly on what both Kate Sparks has said and what Helen Jones has just stated. I mean, it was quite interesting for me as being chair of the Governors Association, because the previous Elenco that we had in my state school, it was Andy McKay. He actually gave quite a detailed presentation to the governing body, and subsequently invited them then to give the same presentation to the Governors Association, which he did. And it's welcome news that there is this this legal advice available to governors, because I know that after that presentation, it did raise quite a number of questions, and unfortunately, the governors were not in a position to ask that. But you know, it's a question of carrying that through the association, because the criteria for change and the challenges it brings. Governors were frightened when the terminology was used as regards to tribunal. So you can understand what anxieties are generated then, because governors had visions of them appearing in front of tribunals, because the information leading up, you know, obviously the process and the information leading up to getting into a tribunal wasn't made quite clear, but it was, you know, it was quite clear that there would be challenges, and you know that really worried governors, especially for those that were going to be link governors for the Elenco.
Thank you, Councillor Beadle. That's probably one of the most concerning areas for myself as well. Michelle, shall I leave it there, because I think you've said quite a lot on that, and we look forward to
certainly. Just to reassure Chair that, you know, we're fully aware and you know, obviously supportive of looking at whatever training and support is required moving forward. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you very much. And I've got Canon Edward Evans, sorry, about practitioners.
Yes, thank you for that information about training. Can I just make a plea that when you do provide training, that you actually use practitioners rather than what I might call theorists. I sit in a governing secondary school governing body, as you perhaps know, and I have learned more from our Elenco than I've learned from any training that I've undergone through anyone else. Like Councillor Beadle said, the Elenco at the school where I am provided us with enormous training, substance, handouts, PowerPoint. It was the most simple and the most effective training I've had to help me understand the implications of. And so my plea would be that when you do provide training, either as an authority or as a consortia, that you use practitioners rather than what I term theorists. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. May I come in? I absolutely concur with that. And there was a lot of training given to ALNCOs to cascade throughout the school. So it is really important. And as was muted earlier on, we did have that. I was present. We had that really good presentation at the Governor Body Association meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm sure the one that the ALNCO provided in the school where I am would have been just as effective. It was and I'm sure the ALNCOs in other secondary schools at least would be able to do the same thing, and that's the point I'm making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, that draws a line under that topic for now. We move on to school places now, and can I bring in Councillor Pam Davis? Councillor Davis, are you ready to ask your question? I'll leave that for a moment just in case there's any issues. You did touch on it earlier. Councillor Davis was concerned about the places that we have in the schools. She may come back in and ask a particular question. So I'll just go into a little bit about the finances now. The ALN training or transformation grant, I understand, is going to be in the region of £934,000, which is going to be distributed by RCT. I don't know where I read it, but I believe Bridgend are set to receive about 70,000. I'm just wondering what proportion of those funds is actually coming to Bridgend?
So the grant is there's an element retained because it's given directly, has been given directly to schools for the release of ALNCOs and kind of that support area. I need to look at that in a little bit more detail and come back to you, Chair, just to kind of work out that kind of element of percentage, if that's okay.
Okay, no problem. We've just got two more questions now. So sorry, it's me again. I was going to ask teachers, I think we've already covered this actually. I was going to ask teachers and coordinators what are the positives of the new act and the negatives of the new act. I think we've pretty much covered it. Everyone seems very positive about it. I've got the salient points here, so I won't go into that again. I think that actually brings me to a close, unless any other councillors have got anything else. I can't see any hands. Oh, Councillor Green, please.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't actually get an answer to my second question, which was as to the adequacy or not of the funding.
Michelle, are you able to, or Lindsay, I'll bring Lindsay on this one, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think as a number of the ALNCOs in schools have mentioned, and certainly officers within Michelle's team, there's a number of funding streams that are available from Welsh Government with regard to the ALN grant, the Innovation Grant and the Transformation Grant, and they split up in multiple different ways. So, for example, the overall grant will be made available through the consortium and made available to local authorities and schools, but also partners in the system as well. So, for example, Health Board and other partners as determined by the grant. So I suppose as far as the adequacy is concerned, to date, there's been a significant funding stream that's been distributed by Welsh Government across local authorities in Wales. But going forward, obviously, the breadth of the demand on the service is going to be extensive. And I think for all the reasons that Kath and other managers have alluded to, and certainly the ALN colleagues who are feeling it sort of on the ground, so to speak, it is going to be a challenge. So what we are going to be reliant on is this continued grant from the Welsh Government to make sure it is supported, because again, we are aware of the fact there are going to be challenges ahead, simply because I think, as Councillor Beadle said earlier, there's going to be a wider range of people availing themselves of these services.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is that okay, Cheryl? Councillor
Yes,
Green?
thank you very much, Chair. My worry is, again, as Lindsay has referred to grants, is that sometimes that doesn't lead to sustainability or indeed, for people being comfortable. And the old story that eventually the grant gets subsumed into the RSG, but nobody can actually find where it is. That's my fear. Thank you.
Lindsay, do you want to come back in on that?
Yes,
Nope.
please,
Oh,
Chair.
yep.
I just think that Councillor Green makes a really important point there. There is an inherent challenge within all grants is the sustainability of them. So part of the work I know that Michelle and her team are doing, and hopefully it's been felt by schools, is making sure that we train up colleagues in the schools to make sure they become expert in this. So not just within their own schools, but within the self-improvement system, schools support each other. And I know that's a central tenet of Central South's approach as well. So I think to allay councillors' fears on this, because it is a valid concern, we do tend to outsource, develop people, so there's less reliant on the grant going forward if we got that expertise in-house.
Okay. I think Councillor Tom Beadle was next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just to add to the fact with the rollout of training that's going to go for governing bodies and for the individual governors, I think that the Bridgend Governors Association will once again run a session so we can reinforce and endorse what is being said within our committee. So it's important that we do that, because I know that so much was gleaned from the presentation that we did previously, and obviously we want to further that again, so that it's definitely on the agenda for one of our next meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Beadle. Next, I've got Canon Edward Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a very quick question on that amount of money being held by RCT. Are we to assume it's being divided amongst the 5 authorities that constitute the consortia? And if that is so, why is it not the consortia itself that is devolving the money? Why devolve it to RCT for them in turn to devolve it to the 5 authorities? It seems to me to be diminishing the funds available by handing it to a third party.
Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Canon Evans. I think RCE are just the operating partner on behalf of the consortium. So there's no additional funding that's held there by RCT. They just organise it on behalf of the consortium. It's a similar sort of process with HR as well.
Yes, Chair. The RCT simply provide the secretariat for the consortium, so it's purely an admin function.
Okay. But that 900,000 is between the 5 authorities.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yes. Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. That's reassuring. Thank you, Canon Edward Evans. I've got Councillor Beadle and Lindsay Harvey's hands still up. I'm not sure if they're new hands or... Nope, they're gone. That's great. Okay, I've got no further hands. I'd like to thank invitees very much for coming and all the work you've done on this, and feel free to leave or stay if you'd like to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Okay, so moving on to item 5, which is the Forward Work Programme. I'll ask Meryl to present the report and then call on members in the usual way.
Thank you, Chair. The report begins on page 49 of the agenda pack, and following on from members' consideration of the Forward Work Programme for this committee at the previous meeting on the 9th of June, the work programme is attached as Appendix A on page 55 of the pack. The proposed amendments requested have been made in red to make it clear what's being added and what's being removed. All of the subject overview and scrutiny committee forward work programmes will be included in the report to corporate overview and scrutiny committee with any updates from each meeting. In addition, you've got attached as Appendix B, that should be, shouldn't it? The recommendations monitoring action sheet to track the responses to the committee's recommendations at the previous meetings. So the response to the March committee recommendations have been emailed and circulated to the committee. The Chair and ourselves discussed the June request to the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support, and his responses to the remaining actions will be provided and circulated shortly. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 9 on pages 53 and 54,
I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Meryl. Do members have any comments they'd like to bring up on the forward work programme or the recommendations? Well, I think everyone's happy with the forward work programme as it stands. Excuse me. Meryl, what happens with recommendations from the committee we've just had?
Just bear with me a moment there. Obviously, there's been extensive questions and responses provided, which you've gathered a lot of supplementary evidence. Yeah. And some of those points, they'll all be in the minutes, obviously, and some of those points members are happy with. I'll just go through a couple which I thought you may want to take recommendations forward on that I've highlighted, but obviously members may have some others. I've just got to go through a number of notes to see that. Right, so one was the role for the Governors Association to ensure consistency of communication responsibilities to governing bodies, and Councillor Beadle said at the end having another training session through the Governors Association as well, if members want to take something along that lines forward.
Yeah, I think so. That would be a good idea.
And then following on from that, Reverend Evans' point about ensuring that the training was professional practitioners, not theorists, and the benefit of having that training from experienced ALNCOs, which I think the officers are in agreement with, but whether the members wanted to make a recommendation to that effect.
Yep, I believe that's sensible.
Okay. There was a couple of questions about the adequacy of the funding and the number of funding streams and the way that's and concern about the future funding then and how that goes forward and not being subsumed to the RSG. Whether the committee wanted to make a recommendation that similarly that other committees have made in the past about the ongoing funding for the ALN Act then.
Yeah, I particularly, well, it's not really to do with the Act, but I wonder
implementation, sorry.
Yeah, it's not really to do with the implementation, but I'm really interested in what we're inheriting as pupils and our continuous increase in.
I was going to say a separate point on that, Chair.
Okay.
Although officers didn't have the information to hand, they offered to bring that back to us. So to tie that in with a recommendation requesting that information formally, so that we ensure it comes back to the committee.
I've got one for the provision for Welsh speakers.
Yes. So there was a response provided. Does the committee want to
monitor the deadline, suggest?
Yes, monitor the deadline, yeah. And I think Councillor Green also made a suggestion that we monitor the implementation of the Act and the numbers as well. You know, we'll look at it again after some time to ensure what's happening with.
Yeah, are you okay with that, Lindsay? Your hand very quickly popped up there. You happy with the just monitoring that it comes in on the 20th?
Yes, yeah, I was just going to say yes. Can we add a point in about that, please? Because it seemed very wishy-washy to me. So I think we need to monitor that one. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Have you got any more, Meryl? Sorry.
Just bear with me. I'm scooting up and down. I am. There was a question about the stability of the CSC, but I think that was answered, wasn't it? I don't think there's anything left there, is there? We had significant assurance that.
I think Councillor Gebby's still out of the meeting, unfortunately, so okay. It was a fairly good response.
Yes. I think there was a question that wasn't asked, which was the peer review work. How would it work? And in view of whether there was instability in the CSC, whether we should have an external peer review group. Whether there's any comment to make there, depend, you know, what the committee feels.
Has anyone got any comments on that? No, I'd suggest that's a sensible one, Meryl, as well.
Okay, I think there were some costs that Michelle Hatter said she could provide on the questions that you asked, Chair, about the additional pressures from people moving to the area, etc.
Yeah, it'd be really useful as well to have what those different ALN categories are, because obviously some are so much more expensive than others, and they must know, because they need to put those provisions in place for those different sections, don't they? So who are they? Where are they coming from? And are we getting funded for it? Councillor Beadle.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a query. I'm looking at the clock and the timing. We don't normally record our post-meeting sessions, but the recorder is still running.
No, this is a public part of the meeting.
Right, thank you. I was just clarified it for me. I thought that we concluded with the meeting, but I stand corrected.
No, sorry, we're still in recorded meeting. I don't have any other, Chair, unless you have, or any other members.
No, I think that's great. I've got no other hands up, so I think that was quite a thorough session. I'm happy with that, and particularly the fact that we're going straight back in. Well, we're going up into the consortia as well. So I'll go on to item 6, which is urgent items, and then no urgent items of business in respect to those of which notice has been given in accordance with Part 4, Paragraph 4 of the Council Procedure Rules. So I'd like to say thank you very much for everyone attending and for your questions, and have a great rest of the part of your day.